Hello everyone and welcome to Pushing Positivity on the Pier, where we introduce amazing people, take a deeper look into their story, and share how they're making positivity actionable each day. I'm Josh Schiller, and today we have the pleasure of being joined by community activist, church leader, and sales representative extraordinaire, Joseph Nyamwange.
Josh, my man.
How did we get back here?
Well, first and foremost, man, you're doing a phenomenal job with pushing positivity. I'm a big fan. But to answer your question, how we got back here, man, it's really where we started, man. This is home. I mean,
For people out there that may not know where we got our start, where are we?
Yeah, so we're here at WIlliam Paterson University, the Russ Berrie Institute for Professional Sales. As you know the history, Josh, this program started from Russ, who just wanted to have this idea that a salesperson could be a profession that could be, idolized or promoted. So he donated money to an institution or any university that was willing to do it, and Willie P took that offer, and as a result, they've been training sales students for the last decade. And we were fortunate to be one of the early adopters in early parts of this program, and that's kind of how we're here.
So before we even get to the RBI program and the professional sales major, let's take a few steps back.
Let's do it.
So where's Joe come from?
So Joseph is from Jersey City, New Jersey. I am born, raised, and bred, spent majority of my life there. First generation from Kenya. My parents came to Jersey City by winning a lottery, and they made their dreams possible. So for me, that's kind of where I came from. It's kind of where I started. It's where my core principles are bred from, a value system, straight from Jersey City.
Grew up in Jersey City.
Sure.
First generation American.
Yeah.
What was that like growing up?
It was interesting. I think, for me it was, you're in America, but in your household it's drastically different. My parents were, were very, very much ingrained in their beliefs, their cultures, and who they were, right? So just imagine almost, being raised in Kenya, but you're here in the United States. And I think where that kind of became interesting is that as soon as I left my house and went to school, it was like a different world. I mean, the value systems are a little bit different. The things that they kind of pride themselves on in the house was drastically different from what I saw in the community. So I think that part was a little bit difficult. It took me a little bit of time to kind of adjust, kind of where do I belong, but I think for the most part, I think it was advantageous, or it was in my benefit, kind of just growing up in a household, with both parents being immigrants.
So we were pushed as a child, had some great examples as parents, got through grammar school, got through high school, and now we wound up straight at WIlliam Paterson, right?
Yes and no. I mean, it wasn't as simple as that. So there were a couple things. One is I went to school in Pennsylvania. I was out there for 2 years, so it was where my dad taught. I think what was most intriguing that kind of brought me to Willie P was my mother was a professor here, and my older brother was part of the sales program, and he was like, "Hey, Joseph, man, like, what are you really trying to become?"
It's an easy question when you're young, right?
Yeah, of course. Just like anyone else, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. No, but seriously, it was, I wanted to be like my dad. So I wanted to get a PhD. I wanted to be a professional. I wanted to teach, and I knew that I had some gifts and abilities to do that. But my brother was like, "Hey, listen, do you really want to study stuff all day, or do you want something that's practical where you can leverage some of your skills and your strengths, such as relationship building, communication, and talking to people?" I spent some time. I met with Dr. Peterson, who I talked to today, who is actually a mentor of mine, and he showed me a different world and a different light. And for me personally, not just from a career standpoint, but professionally, transformation came here, right? So when I came to Willie P, that's kind of the story that led to it, but probably one of the best decisions I've ever made, in my life was to come to WIlliam Paterson and be part of the RBI program. It was definitely a propeller in my career, for sure, no doubt about it.
So let's talk a little bit more about this program and what we actually learned from it. And one thing we really like to do here is make things actionable.
Sure.
So what do you think were some of the most applicable and actionable skills that you were able to learn from RBI that you've taken into your professional, even personal life as well?
Sure. So there are a couple of things, and I learned this. Number one here is that I don't care what you do. I don't care what profession you're in. You're always going to be selling something, right? Whether it's selling yourself, whether it's selling your family. That's why you keep yourself groomed. That's why you take care of yourself, because you want the world to perceive you a certain way. So you're constantly in a selling motion. So let's kind of level set and set that. But in terms of skill sets that I thought transfigured to the real world, there was a couple critical things that I never knew. Like number one, that sales, at least good salespeople, don't always focus so much on talking, but focusing on listening. Selling is truly about listening and identifying problems and solving them. I mean, that's it. I mean, you're in the problem-solving business. And I think if you just extract that from the sales program and apply it to your world, there's constant problems in your life, right? But having the ability to assess, understand where you are, and look for solutions and provide value back, that's everything. I don't care what you do, Josh. Every field in life, it leverages those skill sets, and that's some of the things that I got from here at this program.
So what is this room, and how did this room play a part in Joe becoming who he is today?
Yeah, so I think to understand the importance of the room, you have to understand a little bit more in detail what happened in this program. So on an annual basis, we'd have a competition, and this is more for your viewers, where we would compete on a selling motion, right? So there'll be a particular product or a service that we'll be selling. And you'll have all the students from within the sales program, could be 100 plus students, and they would do a 15-minute role play, right? Being able to do the things we just talked about, right? Identifying needs, provide a solution back, more of a mock. Now, when you did that and this happened over a course of 3 days, they narrowed it down to about 3 to 4 people, right? A couple things changed with the finals that was not there during the original, right? Number one is, the person who's acting as the prospective buyer. Usually they would use an executive from the company that we're selling to. So they know your products, they know the pitches, they know the objections. So it got a lot more difficult, number one. Number two is, at the final round, everybody watched, right? It wasn't like it was, you had an isolated time where people weren't watching. You're in a room presenting, or offering your services. You had another 100 people watching an auditorium. In terms of confidence, I learned that in this room, right? I think that was most important. So I think that's the biggest piece. And number two, and this is maybe just more small, is that, in being prepared for that, this was a practice room for me, man. This was the gym. This was the sales gym.
So let's say somebody's not in the sales program.
Sure.
And if you're not, why aren't you in the sales program? What are some skill sets that, if you haven't taken the courses, do you think people can buff up on or look more into that can help them in the real world?
Yeah, so there are a couple things. The biggest thing is your interview skills, right? I think you have to know your story cold, your accomplishments. And when I say interview, I'm not talking about just having a good resume. That's just to get you in the door. But you should always know what your strengths are, right? With examples. Don't say, hey, I'm good at people skills.
I'm a people person.
I'm a people person.
This guy right here, people person.
Who cares? Everyone has a good attitude associated with them. What you need to do is have some, attributes that define who you are, and have some examples of things that you accomplish in your life to do so. You also need to be self-aware and know what your weaknesses are, right? And not just throw a weakness out there, but talk about what are some of the things you're doing to adjust or fix or develop. People want someone who's coachable, right? And then at the end of the day, also making sure you understand whoever you're being interviewed by, what's important to them. So asking those questions, what is it you look for in an ideal candidate, right? What's the type of, person you want to hire for this role, right? So I think that's the most important thing. And me doubling down on learning how to interview here has teed me up throughout my entire career. And any organization that I've worked for, I've always interviewed well. And that's what gets you the job, right? I think that's the most important. So the one thing I would take away, if anyone, let's say you didn't want to do sales or you're not interested in a program, learn how to interview. Because I don't care what job you're going for, there's going to have to be an interview, right? So that's important.
So we had the opportunity to step out of the classroom. And on that note, I'd like to take a step out of here because there's so much more campus that I'd love for us to see.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right, so we've had the opportunity to learn in the classroom and also apply that in the sales lab. But we also had the opportunity to step outside the classroom and take that knowledge on the world stage. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so part of being in a sales program, there was a section of the program where we were part of sales leaders. And, the philosophy was, all right, we live in the Northeast, but, what does that mean not just, in Northeast when you go across the country and even across the world? So let's start with cross country. We spent a week in San Francisco, and part of our task was to reach out to sales leaders and understand how the sales motions change, which I think is a critical attribute in sales, right? Because sales is such a human connection. We went out to the West Coast to learn that sales is drastically different in the West Coast than it is in the East Coast in terms of personnel, right? So we spent a week there, and we got a good understanding, like, wow. So when we talk to people in the West Coast, we can come with a perspective. But I think what really just turned it on its head is when not only did we go to San Francisco, we went to the Middle East to see how sales operates. And sales is drastically different in the Middle East, right? And I think the underlining message or theme for us was that at the end of the day, whenever you're dealing with people, right, it requires a high level of empathy, which I've mentioned before, which is really understanding people and where they come from and how they're shaped. And I think that's what has been probably most applicable that we learned in our class. So keeping the core principles in terms of listening, understanding, and solving values, but framing it in a way that could resonate with someone who's in the West Coast, resonate with someone who's in Europe, Middle East, and so forth. So that's how we made it applicable, I think, in different countries or different parts of the U.S.
So we've studied the best sales practices domestically. We've studied the best sales practices internationally. Mm-hmm. We've won some sales competitions. Yeah. But now it's really time to take it into the real world. What was that like?
You transitioned into workforce. There was definitely a learning curve. I mean, think about it. You spent a lot of time in the classroom. Now, I don't care how many role plays you still do, it's still the practice field. I think there was definitely a learning curve, which is why I made it extremely important in my decision criteria where I was going to work is who's going to develop in me, who's going to train me. I didn't want to go to a company that was a sink or swim, learn as you go.
It sounds that you knew very early what type of system you were looking for.
Correct.
So how did you get to the point where you even knew what you wanted?
So there are a couple things. One is mentorship. Right? I think having some people that you can look up to, that can give you candid feedback, that you can bounce ideas off, is extremely important in terms of defining what you want to do. I think the second thing is you got to try it. Right? I mean, the biggest holdback for a lot of people is the fear of failure. Right? They don't want to get into sales because of rejection. I was under the assumption that I'm in my 20s, I have nothing to lose. If I hate it, so what? Their skill sets are still going to be transferable. I can always do whatever I want. So I think for me it was more, all right, cool. I have people that I could talk to that I can trust and give me some good guidance. And then more importantly, I'm willing to take some risk. Right? In my case, I had to move to Boston, start life by myself all over again. I think those are the two critical things that helped me in the decision that I made and kind of helped, in terms of, jump-starting me and helping me pick what I want. I think the other thing too that I would be remiss if I didn't mention, Josh, is you got to network, right? Part of, we like to call it your brand. In order for you to expand your base, you got to talk to new people, right? And I there's an interesting story I can tell you, is I had no fear on saying hello to anybody. Right, and that was a big part of my early success. The quick story I'll share is, I remember my second day at the job. It was, EMC was releasing their quarterly earnings, so we met at an airport hangar that EMC owned, and I thought the meeting was at 2. I showed up at 2, but it was at 3 o'clock. From there, I see this guy like practice speaking, right? And this is now day 2 at the job. I don't even know who's who. And I walked up to the guy and I said, hey, listen, relax, calm down. I said, you're going to be fine. You're going to do well. And he started chuckling and he said, who are you? I was like, hey, Joseph, I'm a new sales associate here in Boston. Came from Willie P. Excited to be part of the company. And I just told him, just be confident. And he smiled. He said, hey, my name is Bill. Nice to meet you. Thanks. Fast forward, in the middle of the presentation, they announced the vice chairman is coming to speak. And guess who it is? It's Bill, not knowing his last name was Bill Tuber. And from there, Bill introduced me to a lot of the executive team and a lot of friends, and people were excited who I was and what I stood for, right? And that's networking, and that stuff has propelled me throughout my career. So networking is also a big piece that I'd strongly recommend.
So one of the big reasons why you're here today, outside of your work ethic and what exactly you just said, which is what you stand for.
Yeah.
What does Joseph Nyamwange stand for?
That's a good question. If you had to sum it up to one word, what I stand for is serving, right? It's all about service, man. And a lot of it's rooted into my religious beliefs. As a Christian, what's utmost important to me is making sure that I'm helping others. And I make sure that that's applied to everything that I do, right? Whether I'm in sales or whether I'm a husband or father or a brother or son, when you try to get into the ability of putting people first and being grateful for who you are and what you are, it just gives you a different perspective. Now you can tap into that emotion or that part of you that is screaming that a lot of people want, they're not utilizing, right? And that's how I'm able to connect the dots in my life, right? Between work, life, church, is service. It's putting people first, and that's no easy task, by the way. That doesn't come natural to anyone. Right? We're naturally inclined to be selfish, but for me, it's constant meditation, constant prayer, and kind of relying on the Lord to give me a heart of service.
We've came back to New York.
Yeah.
What's happened in your world?
Yeah. So I've played the role as field sales executive for EMC. I spent the first 5-6 years of my career there. I also took a role of management where I managed a team. I've always had a thirst for leadership, and you probably know that. And then I spent some time at some innovative companies like Salesforce and Microsoft, selling solutions that are transformative, right? That are truly helping businesses achieve more and do more. So that's kind of been, in a nutshell, all that I've accomplished from a career standpoint. But I think for me, it's more than a career, right? If you were to ask me, Joseph, my job currently is Microsoft. My profession is sales, but my life commitment is really about community service, and that's kind of who I am, right? Philanthropy is a big part of everything that I do. Growing up in a household, with both parents who taught us these values and principles, and not only taught us through their words, but taught us through action, was extremely important. I think another component was of just having a level of gratitude, and that came back when I used to go to Africa. I did a study abroad with my mom. She used to run a study abroad, and she would always take me back to the village, and she would always show me where a lot of even my family members are and the conditions that they're in, and saying that could have been you, right? But it's not. I don't think a lot of people, especially in the United States of America, realize how fortunate we are. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth, right? The evolution of my parents to where they were, even living in Jersey City, we started hard. We were in welfare in the beginning of our lives. I saw my parents kind of evolve and kind of go up the ladder in terms of, monetary success. Now, with that being said, though, a lot of my peers, or friends of mine, didn't grow up in a household with both parents, right? Some instances, parents were doing drugs, right? Or there was teen pregnancy involved. That stuff's hard, right? But I think what brings it back home is try living in an orphanage in Kenya where both parents are dead, right? There was a kid that was 4 years old, and I tell this story often, 4 years old, raising his 2-year-old sister because both parents are gone and he's living on the streets. Now put that in a perspective to someone who maybe in an urban environment who's struggling. Yes, it's hard, and I don't want to undermine how difficult it is, but again, it goes back to perspective. There's always someone out there who has a lot worse than you do, right? And I think pivoting from where you are and not using it as an excuse or playing the victim card is important. Acknowledging it hurts, it sucks, but not settling for where you are, I think, too, is extremely important as well.
And on that note, so aside from the professional world that you live in every day, we've also taken some initiatives outside of work.
Yeah, this is the stuff that lights me up.
And let's talk about first about how you saw your parents, you said, evolve from an economic standpoint.
Sure.
And what you're also doing now in terms of the financial peace university.
Being, born and raised in Jersey City and watching my parents, kind of get better from an economic standpoint, I've just felt the calling to just help more people like me in the community, right? One of the biggest struggles, specifically in the African American community, is around finances. We just don't manage money well, right? And then that's not to throw us under the bus. Statistically, it's still on average that the average African American household doesn't even have $5 in emergency savings fund, right? That's scary, right? We're swamped in debt, and a lot of things that we find that are struggles usually ties it back to some form of economics. So there was two things: either we can just talk about the data and the stats and do nothing, and just elaborate the problem, or we could figure out solutions with the understanding, listen, Joe, you're not going to change the world, but if we can help 1 or 2 or 3 families, we've done good, right? So, we started this course, which is a very popular course taught by Dave Ramsey around Financial Peace University. And it's really just some basic steps on how to handle finances, right? Things like, eliminating debt, right? Not being consumed by credit card stuff, or having an emergency fund, or investing and saving money, and not solely relying on Social Security one day to take care of you, or the government to support you when you get older. These are issues and challenges or topics that are extremely relevant. And the cool thing is, Josh, is that it resonated with people, right? People are transforming how they look at money, and they're transforming how they manage their life. And now it's impacting how they run their families, and it's educating generations upon generations to come. So I think, that's what we've been doing from a financial standpoint, which ties back to kind of my overall passion, which is, how do we make my community, Jersey City, which sometimes gets a bad rap, like, how do we make it better, right? And I'm committed to it, and it's been great.
So, because we love making things actionable.
Sure.
What are the top 2 or 3 mistakes people make when it comes to money?
Sure. Number one, we don't budget, right? The average person just spends kind of how they see fit. Number two, we have a huge borrowing problem. Once upon a time, people would spend what they have. I think now, and it's not only a fault to just people in urban environments. This is an American problem. You probably see it in Congress, right? We don't balance budgets. Like, we just spend all, very loosely, and we find ourselves in enormous debt. And number three, invest, right? Warren Buffett says, the 8th wonder of the world is compound interest, right? There are people who are winning in the market. But because we're not budgeting and we're busy paying debt, debt's one of the dumbest things that we can find ourselves in, because we're paying back credit cards with 16% interest when we could be getting that 60% interest in the market, right? So those are I think the 3 things that, people aren't doing. It's, they're not budgeting, they're spending way more than they make, and they're not investing in the market. I think those are the 3 things that are actionable.
So what's the best story you've heard so far from people that have came to your class?
There are a couple of good things, man. I think the one is, there was a lady who was about $125,000 in debt. This was about 3 years ago. And she paid off her first credit card. She came in class crying, and she was like, I'm just tired. It's enough is enough. And I think the people who are moved in our class are the people who are tired of just doing the same things over again and want movement. I stand today, she's debt-free. And over a 3-year period, that's not easy. I mean, she had to make tons of sacrifices. She had to downsize where she was living, and she had to, live on beans and rice and beans. And she took up extra side jobs, to get out of it. But, she's coming with a level of freedom, which is a lot of people want, right? And they're not settling for, I guess I'm gonna have to work till I die, or, it's part of life. So probably the best story I've heard.
So we've had the opportunity to help people from the financial aspect. How else do you give back to the community?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things I do. Outside of teaching, I just give back monetarily, right? So I'm a systematic giver. I give about 15% of my gross back to doing some good to the world. And everyone's different. But one of the things I do is I actually adopted a high school, a public school, Snyder High School, and we're crafting a scholarship that's built around community organization. So everyone in Jersey City is required to have community hours. I'm looking for the person who goes above and beyond to do something that's impacting the community directly. And then we fund them with about $2,000 to either start their own non-for-profit, if they have any entrepreneurial spirit, or more importantly, to provide back to the nonprofit of their choice, whether it's their local church.
Who is this eligible to?
Any student in high school of Snyder High School, so juniors and seniors. And this is our first year of rolling it out, right? So, that's something I'm excited about, that I'm doing locally in Jersey City. Now, outside of locally, I also do some stuff abroad. As you know, I'm a first generation from Kenya, and I'm very, very in touch with my ethnicity and who I am. I'm a strong, proud Kenyan American. So, I go back and, there's an orphanage I support, Motherly Care Children's Home, in which I dedicate time every year, about a week, and I try to donate money whenever I can. So those are the projects that I do. There are at least more, have some kind of framework around this program. But honestly, man, the service is a lifestyle, man. So, my philanthropy is what I live. I try to do it every day possible. The way to push positivity is kind of what the goal is.
I've actually had the chance to travel with you to Africa
Yes.
just recently over the summer.
Yes.
Went for your wedding. We actually had a conversation going back probably 10 years about what we were actually going to do in 10 years.
Yeah.
How would you say we've measured up to what we said? Or
Well, we set the bar really high. I think for us was always figuring out how we were going to sync, right? I mean, you made a decision, I think at the time, to go work for Stryker in the medical device industry, and I went to IT. But we were confident that 10 years from now, we're going to figure out to come back. And we weren't sure in what capacity, but in some way, shape, or form, we were going to connect and put our minds together. And we've met that. And I think if you look at the way we've done it, right? Obviously, we're well accomplished in our careers. We're doing great. We're on a fast track. But if you look at kind of where the connection happened, it's not on a it's not on a tactical level. It's more on a conceptual level, right? More spiritual, where the way we're going to connect this thing is more so how we're going to give back and make the world better, right? That's a noble task that many have tried, right? And I think we've come to the resolution that, listen, we may not be able to change the world, but we're going to leave an imprint, a legacy, which is, we don't have to succumb to negativity, or we don't have to kind of go with the flow, right, on things that are pointless and have no value. That we're going to dedicate our life, right, to how can we make people in urban community better? How do we make people in suburban America better? How do we make people in America better, the world better? How do we make the human race better? And we're doing it not just with talk, we're doing it with action, and that's what this is all about. And that's why I'm 100% excited what you've been doing. I'm one of your biggest fans, especially when you started this thing. The world needs more of this, man. So, I appreciate it. You get a high five for that, and keep it going.
I definitely appreciate that. So, of course, the next logical question is, we're sitting back here 10 years from now.
Yeah.
What does life look like?
Wow, man, it's a good question. This is what I think, and at least what I'm aspiring to be, for us to be, is to be at a place where we are giving back, giving more, and we're training the next generation of leaders to do so. I think what you're witnessing now with both of us is, we're doing what we can to make an imprint. It's very, I don't want to use the word self-centered, but it's what we can do. I think 10 years from now, it's how do we double down on that, right, where we're doing more and we're impacting more because we're in a better financial position, we have family, but how are we training people to do what we're doing? And I think if we could accomplish that in 10 years from now, I think we'll be light years ahead.
People may look at you and go, wow, he gives back a lot. He gives 15%. Like, that's a lot. Like, I don't know if I could do that. What's the most actionable way for people to take that first step towards giving back?
So first off, the 15% is not something that I've been doing from the beginning of time. That's something I've grown into, right? Those numbers are usually gone upward for me. Everyone's different, but here's how, I think sometimes we overthink giving back. And because we think it's so much barriers, we just stop and we say, forget it. I think it's the worst thing. I was giving it back since I was a kid. When I was getting $100 or $10 in a week, right? I would give $1 back to the church. This is my 10%, right? So it's not about, you don't need money or resources to give back. As a matter of fact, I'm a strong believer that money only expounds on what you currently are. So if you're
So I'm all for that. What can people do? If I can't hand you money, so what can I do?
Here's what you could do. Go to your local school in your neighborhood, public school. Make an appointment with either a teacher or a principal and ask them the simple question, what can I do to give back? Go to your local church, your local synagogue, your local temple, wherever you worship. There are tons of organizations out there that you can give time, right? If you can't give time, find someone you can mentor, right? That's giving back. Giving back is not always monetary. Sometimes it's just spending time with somebody, right? Giving someone encouragement when they need it, right? Pat the back. So that's something I would think tangible. I think, hey, listen, go find your local school and ask the principal, what can I do to help? That's what I did with Snyder, right? And then figure out what your gifts are and then give back that way.
Self-awareness, right?
100%.
Right back to it.
Always goes back to that. Look, the principles, Josh, never change. Like, at the end of the day, know who you are, know your story, and be able to share it. That's it. And anything you do, the money will come, the careers will come, the job will come. But if you can do those critical points, I think you hit the ball.
So this is really the part of the show where I like kicking it over to you.
Yeah, if there was, just if there's anything you remember from this conversation, or if there's one thing, I would like you to leave with you is commit a life to service, right? I know that goes, contrary to everything we see in life. Slogan says, "Do me." I'm grinding harder than everybody. It's all about I. In a very individualistic society, I think what's lacking in this world is people who are empathetic and care about others. If you can do that, you're going to be doing something that's much far greater than dollars you make. You're going to leave a legacy that can last generations. I've always shared, what do we want to see at your funeral service? Not that you were the best salesperson, or you hit quota, or you do good in accounting, or whatever the case is. People are going to know the soft skills, right? Did you touch their lives? Did you put them first? So I think that to sum up the conversation, as anyone remembers, is learn service, right, and be able to communicate your value back, to your community. So that's my feedback and advice, for Josh. And again, I'm appreciative to be on the show.
Cool. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule. And I know not just from a professional front, but newly married.
Yeah.
And your dad.
Yes.
And you give back so much. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, your life, to be here and spend it with us. That's first and foremost. And then secondly, which is pretty important, it's the way we end our show every week.
My God.
Appreciate you being here, man.
Glad to be here, man.
Have a great day, bro.
Awesome. You too.